story of the very rich man who knew he was dying. Confined to his bed, he called his doctor, his pastor, and his lawyer, and asked them to meet him there. When they arrived, he told them that he believed in God, but wanted to take some of his money with him, just in case. He handed each of them an envelope with $1 million and instructed them to place the envelopes in the casket just before the funeral. They all promised to do it. Before long, the man died, and the day of his funeral arrived. As the doctor, the pastor, and the lawyer were talking at the reception lunch afterward, the doctor admitted, somewhat sheepishly, that she didn't live up to her promise. The envelope she placed in the casket was $100,000 lighter. But the money would go to a good cause, to support some vital research. Now the pastor, overcome with guilt, was the next to confess. He had kept back $200,000 in order to help with the church building expansion. But when the lawyer heard these confessions, he shook his head at the other two. With pride, he proclaimed that he had fulfilled his promise to his client. He had put in the total amount by check. That lawyer is a cagey guy, and our culture admires people who come up with inventive solutions to better themselves. And yet, this is one of those Sundays that I almost envy preachers who choose their texts themselves instead of using the Revised Common Lectionary. Believe it or not, I did have a choice, and these were the better of the two. But most Lutherans and Episcopalians and people like that use the Revised Common Lectionary. So, all is vanity, we hear in Ecclesiastes. The wise die also, we hear in the Psalm. Put to death, therefore, whatever in you is earthly, we hear in Colossians. And in Luke, we hear what's often called the parable of the rich fool. In some respects, he seems like a smart guy. When faced with a change in his circumstances, he adapts. What's not to admire? But here's the crucial thing. The dialogue that he has is only with himself. Listen again to the text. And he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. I hear no reference to we. And the only reference to you is when he talks to himself. This man lives in a closed system in which he and his soul are the only ones in the room. Now here's something ironic that I wanted to share with you. As I read these words, I was reminded of a song by George Harrison of the Beatles called I, Me, Mine. You may remember it. I looked up the words, which include, all I can hear, I, me, mine, I, me, mine, I, me, mine. Even those tears, I, me, mine, I, me, mine, I, me, mine. No one's frightened of playing it, everyone's saying it. Flowing more freely than wine, all through your life, I, me, mine. Great words. And they focus on our tendency to be self-centered. But here's the ironic part. This website that had the lyrics to the song also had an advertisement in the margin. It said, California Lutheran University, Masters in Counseling Psychology, Masters in Doctorate in Clinical Psychology. I realized that this advertisement wasn't tailored for the general public, but for me. I had probably searched the CLU site once while I was thinking about Ren's interest in counseling psychology. And I'm not tech savvy enough to know how it happened. Here I can tell you. If it was a cookie that got placed on my computer hard drive from the CLU website, or if it came from Facebook or something. But there's no doubt that this ad was meant for me personally. Ironic. I, me, mine. ads that don't pertain to us. Everything is customized. So when God confronts the rich fool and asks, "And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" he might have been prepared to answer, "Mine," except that his life is ending. And he had no relationship that meant more to him than his relationship with himself. So he has no answer. Tomorrow, on the same day that is Eleanor's birthday, my grandma Fern would have been 97 years old. And the one thing that I can say about Grandma was that she absolutely loved to shop. But she was also one of the most generous people I've ever known. She purchased and made items for others, gave away many of her own possessions, and was a faithful and loving servant of God. She had lived through the Depression, when her family survived because when there was very little other food, they had cherry trees that always produced abundantly. I couldn't blame her that in a restaurant she always ordered apple pie rather than cherry. She always looked for the best in other people, and her motto was a version of Scarlett O'Hara's, "After all, tomorrow is another day." When she died, there were few possessions to distribute, and really none that were older than 10 to 20 years, because she had seen many things destroyed in the flood of 1944 when her younger child was a baby. She simply didn't appreciate items for their age and possible monetary value. But I'll never forget her loving encouragement when all seemed particularly hopeless, and how she spoke of God as much through her actions as through her words, and how she celebrated life. Instead of I, me, mine, her life was a version of we, us, ours. The rich fool doesn't recognize that the unexpectedly large yield is a blessing, one not totally dependent on his own efforts. As Bernard Scott suggests, a harvest so unexpectedly large signals a miracle. Something about the reign of God is afoot. God has abundantly provided for the whole community. The farmer does not notice God's hand at all, however. He mistakes the community's wealth, of which he should be a steward, for his own. We, us, ours, the community's wealth, and wealth found in relationship. We all have access to that kind of wealth, whether we're living on a fixed income, are unemployed, are students, or are supporting others. We all have wealth to share. A wonderful new book that the Mission Committee has started reading and discussing, which I invite all of you to read, is called Holy Currencies, 6 Blessings for Sustainable Missional Ministries, by Father Eric Law. His main idea is that there are 6 main currencies, that is, blessings that flow through a system and make it healthy and productive. The currency of money, certainly, but also the currency of time and place, the currency of gracious leadership, the currency of wellness, the currency of truth, and the currency of relationship. The rich fool was rich in the currency of money, but that was about all. And where he was particularly lacking was in the currency of relationship. He simply took into account only his own well-being. He would not have been one to sing, "Praise God from whom all blessings flow," because he didn't recognize that they came from God. And he also didn't recognize that they needed to flow. As they flowed toward him, so they also needed to flow away from him, toward those in need of what he had to give. But everyone could share the currency of relationship. Everyone can be a friend. Everyone can offer a prayer, or a shoulder, or a ride. There's a story told by Florence Ferrier, a social worker in Appalachia, about a family she knew there. She says, "The Sheldons were a large family in severe financial distress. After a series of misfortunes, The help they received was not adequate, yet they managed their meager income with ingenuity and without complaint. One fall day, I visited the Sheldons in the ramshackle house they lived in at the edge of the woods. Despite a painful physical handicap, Mr. Sheldon had shot and butchered a bear, which had stepped into the yard once too often. The meat had been processed into all the big canning jars they could find or swap. There would be meat in their diet even during the worst of the winter when their fuel costs were high. Mr. Sheldon offered me a jar of bear meat. I hesitated to accept it, but the giver met my unspoken resistance firmly. Now you just have to take this. We want you to have it. We don't have much, that's a fact, but we ain't poor. I couldn't resist asking, what's the difference? His answer proved unforgettable. When you can give something away, even when you don't have much, then you ain't poor. When you don't feel easy giving something away, even if you got more than you need, then you're poor, whether you know it or not. Sharing makes us rich toward God, as we let one currency flow from someone who has much to give toward someone else who has much of another currency to give. Faith, love, money, relationship. Where are you rich? Where can you share of your God-given riches? We, us, ours. Give thanks